Welcome to Honoring the Journey. I'm Leslie Nease, and I am your tour guide through another amazing journey that we get to honor today. And today I'm super excited because I have been reading about Molly for a while. And Molly, I see your name online. LaCroix, is that right?
That is
Is that how
correct,
you say it?
yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh,
Molly
that's how we
LaCroix.
say it.
I've never said it out loud or heard it said out loud. I've been reading about Molly because she likes to help people on their journeys. And so today, not only do we get a treat of just getting to know her on a personal level, but we also get to hear some things and how she's helping other people through their journeys. So Molly LaCroix is she's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she actually really specializes in internal family systems, which I want her to touch on a little bit in the second half. I think that'll be fun. And then she's from Oregon. She likes to hike and she likes downhill skiing. So Molly, we already have so much in common.
Oh, good.
Yes, I live in Utah, so I love to ski as well.
Oh,
Well,
yeah,
it's okay.
awesome.
It's a love-hate relationship. I didn't put skis on till I was 49, and then
Oh, goodness,
so
yeah, I
so
got
the
to start when
fear,
I was 5.
the fear of death, it's there.
It
Um,
enters into the mind.
but Molly's also written a couple of books, one of them called Journey to Shalom, and I love the subtitle, Finding Healing, Wholeness, and Freedom in Sacred Stories. Oh my gosh, I got chills again. Every time I read that, I get a chill because
Oh,
there's
thanks.
something
Yeah.
so special about hearing somebody's story. And I know I don't
Mhm,
take it
mhm,
lightly that people
mhm.
really do get vulnerable on the show, and I
Yeah.
appreciate that. And so treating them with such a sacred, I don't know, I just love treating a story as sacred is beautiful.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
welcome to Honoring the Journey, Molly. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you, I'm doing great. It's a
Awesome.
beautiful day here, ups and
Yeah.
downs.
So to kick things off, Molly, I've been doing something fun for season 2. I did not prep you for this. So, but it's
That's
fun. It's
okay.
just a fun little question to get to know you, to get to know you as Molly, the person, not the family therapist, not, the writer. But here's my question. It's a different question for everyone. So what did you want to be when you were a child and why?
You
So
know,
fun.
I wish I had a spectacular answer for that,
You don't need
but I
one.
really didn't. I wasn't one of those kids who had "I wanna be this" when I grow up,
Right.
until maybe high school, and then I wanted to be a doctor. And
Ooh.
I, was pretty good at science, and I worked at a lab, a medical lab when I was in high school. Back in the day, I'm sure you couldn't do that now, but, they trained me to be a phlebotomist, and I ran some lab tests, and
In
I
high
thought,
school?
uh-huh. Yeah,
Wow,
I got to
that's
do blood draws,
crazy.
and I know,
Wow.
I'm sure these days they make you go to school for that, but,
Well, I
um,
don't know.
so I did start out in college pre-med, but I rather quickly shifted gears.
Yeah.
So,
So basically what you're telling me, what I'm reading into this is that you've always wanted to help people.
yes, that
Yeah,
was
you
there.
wanna
And
yeah, okay.
I recognized I was still drawn to healthcare. I don't know if we're talking about my previous professional life yet, but I was in healthcare administration for 10 years and loved it. I loved being in a clinical setting. Most people say, "Oh, I don't want to ever go in a hospital." I actually worked in one and loved it. So,
Well, that's good. I'm
yeah.
glad you liked it. I do wanna tell you, I do have some dogs. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with them. They do their thing, and sometimes they're my co-host, so I apologize. I try to keep them
I
as
have 2
happy as I
dogs.
can. Okay, so if I hear them, just so you know, folks,
They're in another thankfully, my office is secluded from where the dogs are, but
this is as secluded as I can get from my dogs right now. But anyway, yeah, I think I may have to at some point take them to doggy daycare and schedule all my interviews on that day because they've been a little into being my co-host lately. So
feeling
anyway,
left out.
yeah, I feel like
They
they're
wanna
like,
share their
Mom, what are you
stories.
doing? Yeah, we want to share our stories, Mom. Can you honor our journey?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, okay. So did you grow up in Oregon or where did you grow up, Molly?
No, we moved all over the place. My dad was an engineer with Procter and Gamble, but it was like being in the military. So roughly every 3 years or so, we relocated all over the country, and then we lived in Germany. I was in Germany for junior high and part of high school, which was a fantastic experience. And then we moved back to the States. So it was.
Wow. Well, I can kind of relate. My dad was in the military, so we moved and I went to high school in Okinawa. So, yeah.
Yeah,
But it
yeah,
makes you
it's
so
an interesting
adaptable, doesn't it?
experience. It does,
Yeah.
and we all. I embrace change, which I
Me
think
too.
is both my personality and my experience,
Yes.
and also my most difficult season of life was after one of those moves. So
Oh,
it's a lot for a child to constantly relocate and be the outsider, and usually
yeah.
it works pretty well, but not the time we moved in the middle of high school. That
Oh,
was
I know
not a
that's really
not a good
hard.
time to have to move.
Yeah. Oh, I can't imagine. Yeah, we actually moved to Okinawa, the right before my ninth grade year. And
Mm,
when we were there, my dad got an extension so that we could
uh-huh.
graduate from there. Because we were like, it
Nice.
took us, I mean, it was so scary to move to another country right as you're
Mhm.
starting high school. But then when we got there, we
Sure.
loved it. I was like,
Yeah.
don't make me move, and
Right.
so it was nice.
Oh,
It
I'm
was really
glad that
nice.
he could do that.
So you mentioned you had a hard time, a struggle. What happened, Molly?
Well, we moved after my sophomore year of high school. So I'm smack dab in the middle of high school. And we moved. The culture could not have been different from the
Mm,
inner. It was technically a Department of Defense school that we attended because we were in Bonn, which at that point was the capital of West Germany. And it functioned more like an international school because all of the embassies were in Bonn. Most of the embassy kids came to our school, so we had 32 nationalities represented among 400 children, kindergarten through 12th grade. So it was an incredible experience. We traveled
yeah.
constantly because traveling in Europe, everything is very close to,
Oh, yeah.
close by. You get the
Yeah.
car, and we were 5 hours from Paris and 2 hours from Brussels, and
Can you imagine?
and
Oh, what a
and then
life.
we moved back to the Midwest, and which is fine. A lot of people love living in the Midwest, friendly people. But it was such a culture shock, and of course, kids had been together their whole
Mm,
life, and while some of them were polite, they weren't
mm,
really interested in bringing someone new into their lives as far as
yeah.
being close friends. And my strategy from a very young age for adapting to change was to identify a special friend.
Mm.
And the earliest memory I have of doing that was when I was 3.5, and my younger brother and sister are twins, and they were born. And I had a 5-year-old sister, so she's 5, I'm 3.5. My mom has twins. My poor mother.
Oh,
So,
no. Ooh,
not surprisingly, there wasn't a lot of her left for me. And
yeah.
that young age, I found a woman who lived on the cul-de-sac near our house, and I would toddle over to her house by myself and
Oh
visit
my
her.
gosh. Oh my
And her
word.
name was her name was Minnie. And so when my first grandchild was born, I now have four. I decided to be Minnie to my grandchildren because that woman was such a special person to me at a season of life where I just needed that nurturing.
Oh,
That
yeah.
I have a wonderful mother, but you only have so
Yeah, I mean,
much
she's
you can
busy.
give.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so my strategy every time we moved, as I reflected back at one point, I had a special friend every place we lived. And when I came
Mm,
back middle of high school, I never had that special friend in that season.
mm,
It was just a tough season of life. And so my primary adaptation wasn't available to me. And lots of, those are hard years. I don't care what's happening in
oh,
your
yeah, I
life.
don't
Those
care
are
if you're
just
in
tough
the same
years.
place and a
It's
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So who knows? Some of what I went through, I might have gone through anyway. But it was a tumultuous time, and I didn't have the as with most teens, you don't have the wherewithal to understand what's going on inside of yourself,
Yeah.
and so it was just a tough season.
Did you grow up in church at all with your family, or was that something you were introduced to later?
Good question, because I was about to say, and I didn't have that spiritual resource to
Mm,
orient me. I did not. My family was nominally culturally Christian, but we didn't even go to church on Christmas and Easter.
mm,
So I, however, see a thread from an early age. Friends who did, my some of my good friends would take me to Sunday school, and at one point when I was in high school, somebody gave me one of C.S. Lewis's books, Mere Christianity, and I was intrigued. And so there
Such a
was
game
there was
changer.
interest there. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was interest there. I sought out a church when I was first in college, and I was struggling still, still processing all those changes that I experienced. And so I didn't come to faith until I was an adult, but
Mhm.
it was kind of a gradual process of God being with me along the way.
Yeah. And you recognizing that.
Yeah, with hindsight. Uh-huh.
Yeah. In
Yeah.
hindsight, you see it. At the time, you were like, "I don't know what's happening."
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So, tell me a little bit about your faith. Where do you stand now, and has it been something that has always been with you since you, I guess, came into it, or is this like, is it getting stronger? Where are you at with your faith?
Yeah. Well, I have long recognized that there are obviously pros and cons to not being raised in the faith,
Mhm.
but given what I now know of how much spiritual wounding has occurred in some church spaces, I'm
Mhm.
very thankful that I wasn't in an environment that was harmful.
Yeah.
And um, I, coming to faith as an adult, I had a lot of questions. I already had certain perspectives, and I went to a church. It was only the second church I tried. I went and they had a female pastor, so it's a Presbyterian Church USA, PCUSA. So they have firm women in leadership. And I had tried to talk to other male pastors, but she was the first one that actually was patient with me. We just kept meeting. I'd have a question, she'd answer the question. What do they think
That's
about this?
awesome.
And
Yeah.
so that was super helpful to me.
Mhm.
And and I have, eh, for the most part, been in PCUSA churches.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't adhere to what people think of as traditional Presbyterian doctrine in terms of Calvinism. I'm in a very progressive Presbyterian church at this stage of
Okay.
my life. Um,
Gotcha.
I have sojourned into some fairly conservative spaces. I didn't stay long because my gifts are leadership and teaching. So,
Yeah.
if I'm in a church
You're not
that
gonna
says
find
women
any place. Yeah.
no, that if their attitude is women can't even be ushers, I mean,
Right. Yeah.
why would I stay there?
Right.
So
Right.
I've
Yeah,
been
that's
I've been
amazing.
relatively fortunate to be in healthy spiritual communities. Now, my personal um, understanding of scripture has evolved over time.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
puts me in a pretty liberal to progressive stance at this point.
Right.
Um, but I really benefited from a season of being, for instance, the Presbyterian church that I was in when I came to faith had a very robust adult Bible study. And
Oh, nice.
yeah, so I didn't know anything. I didn't know any of those stories. I mean, people
Yeah.
talk about, well, of course, blah, blah, blah. And I think, well, no, I don't
No?
actually.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
When
right.
you're
Oh, yeah.
raised in the spaces, you assume everybody knows. And, I
I
have a friend
remember
here
people being
in
shocked that,
yes.
wait, what? You weren't, what? You weren't raised in the church?
Wait,
I thought everybody
you don't
was.
know the story of
Right.
Jonah? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
It's yeah, I assume people know it all, and I have a friend here who was raised without, like, her mom was kind of a hippie and was like, "I'm just gonna let you do your thing and find what
Mhm.
you feel most comfortable with," and so that's how she was raised, and when I tell her some of the things about my past or things that I've learned or stories from the Bible, she just is in complete shock. She's like,
Mm.
"What?" And I look at her like, "What? You didn't have to do this, and you." She's like,
Yeah.
I don't even understand." Like, I told her, what we believed about hell, and she was like, "I
Mm.
cannot believe people have that kind of imagination about what's gonna happen when they die." Like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
horrifying. And
Yeah.
it's funny because I don't think I realized how horrifying it was until I stepped away. And,
Absolutely. We you don't have the perspective of,
mhm.
especially if you're raised in it, it's the waters you've always been swimming in, and
Right,
everybody
yeah.
and authority around you from parents to pastors is telling you the same story. that's the only story you're hearing. And
Hmm.
so you don't get the perspective until you step out of it. I'm very grateful. As I said, I've really never been in churches that teach the more harmful
Yeah, the scary stuff.
things. Yeah, and
Yeah.
honestly, having come to faith as an adult, if I was exposed to that, I would have dismissed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
that's one
and
benefit.
Well, and it is funny once you see it, you can't unsee it, like, but
Yes,
it took me a while to see it. And then I was like, oh my
sure.
goodness, I can live my life and not believe that. Like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
amount of weight that I lost off my
yeah,
shoulders, can't even
yeah,
tell you. And it's like,
right.
I didn't even realize I was carrying it, and
Mhm, mhm.
to me,
Yeah.
it just, I don't know, it's
Yeah,
just a whole
and how
different world.
about patriarchy for
Mm,
another example of a weight
yes.
on your shoulders?
Oh, yeah,
You
it's
know?
all just kind of falling off little by little,
Right,
and as it falls
right.
off, I'm like, "Wow, Leslie," and I didn't even realize how much fear I was living in and how much,
Mhm,
just dread and anxiety, it just was all on me, and I
mhm.
um, didn't even know. I would have called it
Yeah.
freedom. I would have called it freedom
Mm,
because
mm. Yeah,
I had a
interesting.
get out of hell free card. I asked Jesus into
Mm,
my heart, so
mm,
I was
mm.
fine.
Right.
But the problem is when you're an empathetic person, the way that I am,
Mhm,
um, you're not ever fine because all you think
mhm.
about is other people and they're going to go to hell, and it's
Mm,
just a
mm.
horrifying way to live to
Yeah,
imagine that. So
yeah.
yeah, letting go of that was a big deal. I'm glad you never had to pick
Mhm.
it up. Good for you. That's
I'm
a
very
hard one.
thankful. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, so tell me, all right, tell me about your life now. I know that you are a marriage and family therapist and a writer, which I cannot wait to hear more about all the good things that you offer. But tell me a little bit about your home life and your husband and what do you
Yeah,
do for fun?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so my husband and I have been married 42 years, and
Oh,
we
girl,
have I
that's
know.
amazing.
We have 2 adult children who are married and parenting, and
Fun.
they both have 2. Our daughter has 2 girls, our son has 2 boys. Very symmetrical.
Rounding it
And
out. Nice.
my grandchildren, I tell you every cliche you've ever heard about being a grandparent is true. It's the best thing ever. I'm obsessed
I've
with them.
heard. Oh, I bet you are.
But not so obsessed that I stayed where they are, which is in San Diego. We were in San Diego for 38 years. That's where my husband's
Wow.
career was. And when he was, we just decided we wanted to spend time elsewhere on the West Coast and discovered Bend. We live in Bend, Oregon, which is Central Oregon. It's
Mhm.
a mountain town. Um, and I
You're
just
near
knew
Mount Bachelor then, right?
that's 20 miles away. Yes, that's very easy.
Woohoo! No
Yep.
wonder you like skiing.
Yes, yes, it's a
Sorry, I
bluebird day
digress.
today, and here I am sitting in my office.
Oh, I know, right? Oh, work.
Yeah, but,
Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to be here sooner, but he wasn't ready to come until he retired. So he retired 5 years ago.
Mhm.
He's 7 years older than I am, so he's a little ahead of me. Plus, I'm pretty sure I won't retire anytime soon, but
Yeah. Too much
but
joy
it
in what you
even though
do.
our kids and grandkids are in San Diego, we love being here.
Mhm.
So,
Oh, I'm
and
so glad.
we start our days with a hike on the trails almost
Yeah.
every day. We have 2 dogs, a Saint Bernard and an Australian Shepherd, and
Oh my
so we're out on
gosh.
the trails.
You're like a Norman Rockwell painting in real life is what it sounds like. The American
Yeah.
dream with a Saint Bernard and an Australian Shepherd. 2 of the best dogs, I think, but some of the best breeds,
Fantastic.
but that's so
Yeah.
fun. Well, good for you.
Yeah.
I'm excited. So we're kind of neighbors then. We're not too far
Yeah,
away
you're
from each
close.
other.
Yeah.
I have friends in Bend, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. So
Oh,
pretty.
yeah.
Yeah. If there's another state I would live in, it would probably be Oregon, I would think. Yeah, because I'm definitely not going back east. We moved
Yeah, no, we've been
from
in the
South
West
Carolina.
all these years, and
Yeah,
it's home.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. All the mountains and there's so much to do.
Yeah.
But well, we're gonna take a little bit of a break. And when
Okay.
we come back, I want to delve a little more into what you do. And also kind of, I want to pick your brain a little bit about maybe somebody who might be carrying a little bit of religious trauma.
Okay.
Because unfortunately, I think we have some people listening who may have had some,
Hmm.
and I know I'm one of them. So,
Hmm.
we can maybe talk about that a little bit. So we'll talk about that after
Sure.
the break. Welcome back to Honoring the Journey. I'm Leslie Nease here with Molly LaCroix, and we are having a conversation. Well, we were talking about, of course, her amazing life, her Norman Rockwell painting life over in Oregon with her Saint Bernard and her Australian Shepherd. But it's been really fun getting to know you, Molly, and I can't wait to dive a little more into, golly, I don't even know where to start. You're a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I know you've spent time working with people who have had some religious trauma. And I would love for you. I don't even know what I would ask for you to touch on in this, but I know that we have a lot of people who listen to this podcast who are listening because they need to know they're not the only one.
Yeah,
And they
that's
they
true.
they want to connect with a story, a sacred story, and they want to feel understood. And I feel like it's kind of
Mhm.
hard to do that. And deconstruction, which is what we call it, not sure I love the term, but it is what we call it. When
That's
you're
right.
going through a faith transition of sorts, it can be really lonely and it can be
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
really difficult. So
Yeah.
I don't know what would you say to somebody who's listening who's going through, maybe licking some wounds from religious
Yeah.
trauma?
Yeah. Gosh, I have so much to say, but the first thing I want people to know that at at their very core, they are beloved.
Mm,
That the messages that they heard that contradicted that, that instilled fear, that instilled perfectionism and scrupulosity because there was this notion that you're never good enough to please God.
mm.
That's all simply untrue.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and we God is love, and we are created in the image of God. And at our core, we possess we reflect God's image. We have God-given resources, and those can't be damaged by
Mhm,
whatever happens to us in life. So that's the other thing, is to understand that yes, these adverse experiences that people have, that are on a spectrum from things that are hurtful, like spiritual bypassing and inappropriate advice giving and being told they need to pray more and they just don't believe the right things,
mm,
all the way over to trauma.
mhm.
Wherever on that continuum, that affects us when we have those experiences,
Yeah.
and we carry burdens from them. And then our system is, again, has a God-given ability to adapt. We adapt to whatever experiences we encounter as humans. That is a gift. If we couldn't adapt, we wouldn't survive.
Mhm.
And but those adaptations can can constrain our best functioning. So again, being in a high control religious environment, one adaptation is perfectionism.
Oh,
And
wow. Yeah.
so this striving to be good and this fear-based protective strategy hijacks your life and
Mhm.
constrains your ability to do what God tells us is most important in the great commandment, which I call the great vision. The
Yes,
great
I
vision
love
for our
that.
lives is to love
Yeah.
ourselves and others and God in this beautiful reciprocal flow of loving energy.
Mm,
And and that all gets constrained by the ways we have to adapt to adversity. And that happens whether one is in a spiritual community or not. All
right.
humans
Yeah.
experience adversity, we all adapt. But I actually am in a doctoral program, a doctor of ministry program, and my project is about spiritual abuse. And so I've been knee deep in the research this semester. And and it is clear that while trauma is trauma, and the good news is that we know a lot more than we used to about treating trauma. And so if someone has suffered religious trauma, they can be treated. And it's clear that spiritual wounding is different. There
Mm,
is something profoundly damaging when someone is taught by their spiritual community, that community where they're supposed to be safest and most loved and held, when the message is you're not good enough and you're never going to be good enough, and if you are good enough you're going to hell for eternity, and hell is not some benign place,
Right.
and all those kinds of twisted messages that people have heard. There is something about that provokes some pretty profound distress.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. Well, and I think it can affect, I mean, not even just your mental health, but just in your physical health, in
sure.
your
Yeah.
relationships, and how
Yeah.
you perceive people. I mean, one of the things that I've really had to work on since deconstructing and really kind of coming out of some of those thoughts, um, you know, just really learning to trust my intuition and my voice,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
learning
Mhm.
that I am actually not this horrific person
Mhm.
created by God to be hated, or not really hated, but
Mhm.
avoided because I
Mhm.
was a sinner. But now that I've asked Jesus, I'm okay,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
now he covers me. And so God
Mhm.
looks at me, he sees Jesus, and that's supposed to make me feel peace. Like it always kind of just confirmed the narrative that I had,
Mhm.
as a
Mhm.
child. Like,
Mhm.
I'm not enough. I need,
Right.
my dad left when I was 6 months old, and,
Mhm.
my mom was
Mhm.
married a few times. And so it was hard
Yeah.
to find that
Yeah.
connection. And then to find that I do have this father in heaven who is God, yet another father. I'm like, I'm not sure
Mhm.
I trust him anyway. And then
Mhm.
to find, oh,
Mhm.
well, that makes sense. He doesn't want me either.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
then it's just
Yeah.
weird. Like, it was very difficult.
Very
I
confusing.
Well, and you
The mess
walk
when you
in
s
sort of, it's like a peace that you have
Mhm.
when you're in
Mhm.
it. When you
Mhm.
have asked
Mhm.
Jesus, you're like, "Oh, I'm good."
Mhm.
But, like, when
Mhm.
you step
Mhm.
out of it for a second and you think about it, you're like, "Am I though?" Like, I
Yeah.
just never
Right.
had, it was like a
Mhm.
surface piece, but the internal piece
Mhm.
was missing. And that's
Right. Yeah.
tough.
It is. It is. It's
Yeah.
very difficult.
Yeah. And so when you talk to people who've got religious trauma, and especially in this project that you're doing, which I'm so like, wow, that's amazing. I can't wait to hear more about that. I don't know if that's going to be public, but woo, I can't wait to hear more about it. But just like dealing with the people with religious trauma, do you find that, I don't know, is it similar? I mean, do people come to you in different ways as far as, like, I don't know, somebody, maybe insecurities, or like, what is the main way that people come to you and they're not even really sure what
Mm.
it's from, and you're like, oh, okay, as we peel the onion back, I'm realizing this is stemming from, because I think sometimes we're experiencing things and we're not sure what's happening.
Right, right. Yeah.
Does
Well,
that, I just
I
really
wanna
went
yeah,
around a lot for that question.
right. That's okay.
Sorry.
Well, I wanna be clear for your audience that professionally, as far as my work with clients,
Right.
I have not specialized in treating spiritual abuse.
Right.
What's interesting is how recent all of this is in terms of even the terminology. High control
Mm,
religion is a relatively new term. Laura Anderson's book, When Religion Hurts You, I want to
yes.
credit for her research, and she speaks of adverse religious experiences. And as I did my research, and you Google those terms, those are new terms. So what
Right.
I originally saw, I went to a seminary to get my master's in marriage and family therapy. So I've always had a lot of clients in my practice who identify as Christian. And early on, what I saw were things that I didn't even have names for.
Right. Yeah.
but but a client who was her story is in my first book, which she graciously gave me permission to share. She was born a twin, and as so often happens with twins, one of them struggles because just in the process of the birth, sometimes that's not that unusual. My younger brother and sister was the case. Her brother was fine. She was in the NICU. And the story that she was told while she was growing up was that her parents prayed over her that if she were going to be a good Christian, that God would let her live.
Oh my.
That was the narrative she was told as a child. So you can just imagine. So this is a client I had in my caseload years and years ago. And when I was first getting a sense for the kind of harm that was being done in
Yeah.
some kinds of Christian communities, And again, before I ever heard the term deconstruction, I I was wrestling with this. I was in a group practice with other Christian therapists, and I said, you guys hearing stories like this? They're all shaking their heads, yes. And I wrote my first book because I wanted to bring a resource to the church to help people understand what happens in us when we're confronted by vulnerability. So I'm the model that I use in my work, you mentioned earlier, it's called internal family systems.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very helpful way to understand human functioning. And that is this idea of multiplicity. That when we turn our attention inside and start paying attention to what's going on inside of ourselves, we often notice that there are multiple voices, there are different emotions, there are different perspectives about things. It can be quite chaotic and confusing inside some days.
In there, yeah.
Yeah,
Somebody
yeah.
says, "Do you hear voices?" And I just wanna go, "No," because I know if I say yes, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but don't we all?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and that's the thing. This concept of multiplicity, it has been pathologized, and it isn't pathology. It's
Mhm.
actually human functioning.
Right,
And
yeah.
for me, as I was learning this, some years after specializing in treating trauma, for one thing, it really described what my clients were telling me. And for another, I found it quite congruent with Christian spirituality because, after all, we worship a God who is multiple. So, and we're
Mhm.
created in God's image. So why would we think we wouldn't be multiple? And
Yeah.
yes, a different way than God, but still. And there are a number of things. One of the things about this model that's profound, because it's a secular model,
Mhm.
is that in the course of developing the model, Dr. Richard Schwartz, who developed IFS, discovered that no matter what had happened in someone's life, no matter how adverse their experiences, how profound their trauma, they had an undamaged core, that they
Hmm.
possessed healing resources. And that to me was so congruent with me being created in God's image.
Yeah.
After all, what could it mean to be created in God's image if we didn't have God given resources that we
Mhm.
could bring to bear on our life and others' lives?
Mhm.
And he helpfully named those as 8 C qualities, like compassion and curiosity and clarity, courage, creativity, connection, calm. I'm going to forget one of the C's, but anyway, there are 8 of them.
Yeah,
And
you get the idea.
and yes, you get the idea. And so, knowing that we have both this undamaged core, for
Mhm.
lack of a better term, in the model we call it self. Some people like to call it true self or the soul or whatever language works. But we also have different members of this internal family. Now, in an ideal scenario, they just bring wonderful qualities and traits that make each of us who we are uniquely meant to be. But life also happens.
Hmm.
And so some parts of us get burdened by wounds, and other parts of us have to protect the system from those wounds because the wounds are our vulnerability, which
Mhm.
is perceived as risky.
And vulnerability is risky sometimes, but it's
Well,
also
yes,
how we
yes, it's
connect.
always risky, and
Yeah.
it's how we connect. So it's this profound paradox at the center of who we are as humans. And as organisms, we do adapt, and we adapt primarily to survive. And our brain is constantly assessing, is this good or is this not good? Is this safe
Mm.
or is this a threat? And so when something is perceived as a threat, it is adaptive for us to have parts of us who will take on jobs. It's like putting on a uniform. They take on a job of something like being your internal critic. Because
Wow.
let's say you were shamed in some situation and it happened enough that you're now carrying this burden of shame, this sense of I'm not good enough. And so
Mm.
a part of the system says, that's risky. I don't want to be shamed again. I don't want that pain to surface. So I'm going to criticize you before somebody else can. I'm going to
Oof.
make sure that you stand in front of that mirror and you critique yourself an extra 10 minutes before you leave the house, because then somebody outside the house isn't going to find fault with you or
Or if they do,
apply it
it'll
to
just
being a
match the narrative that you already have.
Well,
Mm.
sure. Then the challenge, if you're
Ugh,
criticized anyway, then
yeah.
up comes this well of pain and shame.
Right.
So so these protective parts of the system take on these jobs. And so pretty soon, what we've got going on inside is we have this undamaged core that we like to talk about as the leader of the internal family, because that's
Mm.
ideally what's happening, like a director directing an orchestra. The director is directing, and all the musicians are playing, and it's this harmonious blend of beautiful music. But instead, what happens as life unfolds is
Mm.
some of those musicians are wounded, and so they're feeling broken and they're holding pain. And
Right.
others are playing too loudly and at odds with each other because they're trying to mask the pain. And pretty soon you have chaos and cacophony instead of
Mm.
this beautifully flowing um, dynamic that it again we're meant to exhibit all of these
Right.
wonderful qualities.
See, I love the way you're explaining this. I love because I'm just now starting to understand the false self versus the true self and trying to step into that and trying to understand who I really am. Because I think for so long being in religion, I was conditioned to be what I was supposed to be.
Right.
But, like,
Hmm.
sometimes some of that wasn't necessarily who I really was, but I
Right.
fell into that, so the hardest thing for me in deconstruction, I think, has been stepping into my true self, letting go of the false self, which is the thing that was trying to be everything for everyone, um, and then realizing there were people that didn't really like me for who I really am. They
Yeah.
liked my false self, and they're just kinda mad
Mhm.
at me for not continuing in that,
Yeah.
and even seeing, like, understanding that Jesus was here to show us, like, this is what it looks like to walk in who you really are. Your true
Yeah.
self that is connected to God, that has, the leader of
Right.
it.
Yeah.
This is what it's like. And this, if you live like this, you're gonna be free. And
Mhm.
the truth is I mean, yeah, there is freedom in that, but, getting to that place when you've walked in a false self for so long is
Mhm.
incredibly difficult. There's a mourning process, there's
Yeah.
an anger
Mhm.
phase, there's all the things,
Mhm.
that's a tough thing, but, like, now
Yeah.
understanding it even from
Well,
a psychological perspective makes total sense to me. Does that
yeah, so there are some nuances of the way IFS views all of this
Yeah.
that might be helpful.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I do try to avoid is the language of false self.
Mm.
I understand the point of it because
Right.
it's that inauthenticity, it's that
Right, yeah.
pretending.
To be what
However,
people want you to be. Yeah.
right, in this model, what we do is, let's say, one of the very common inauthentic so-called false selves for women in the church is to overfunction, to do
Mhm.
everything for everybody and to not
For
have a
0
self,
money.
to not have a self because
Yeah, yeah.
you're not allowed to. You're supposed to be this over functioner. I'm
Mhm.
never gonna do anything for myself, etc. Not
Right.
healthy.
Mhm.
So so it makes sense if you're in a culture that values that, that a part of the system says, well, this is what's valued. This is what's going to keep me safe. This is what's going to
Mm.
keep me on the inside because that feels most safe to us as humans. So you have a prominent part of your system whose job it is to overfunction.
Mm.
So in this model, rather than ejecting that part from the system,
Goodbye. Yes. You're outta
the
here.
process, yeah, the process of healing is to connect with her
Mm.
and to hear her sacred story
Mm.
because she has a story to tell about why she's doing what she's doing, how imperative it was to take on that job to keep
To
you,
protect you. Yeah.
to protect you, to keep you.
That's true.
In some cases, the roles they play are survival.
Mm.
And when she tells her story, part of her story is about when she took on this job, and that is sort of the doorway to the one who's holding the wounds,
Mm.
that part of you who's still stuck in a particular time and place where adversity occurred. And
Mm.
that part also has a story that we want to hear. And it's the process as those stories unfold in the presence of a loving witness, this leader of the
Right.
internal family,
Yeah.
again, accompanied by the Holy Spirit, creating a sacred space for these stories to unfold, that's how
Mhm.
healing happens. And so we ultimately, I talk about linking arms. So this part of you that maybe overfunctioned has a lot of great qualities that when she knows it's safe not to overfunction, she can still bring wonderful qualities like compassion and concern for others to your system, which are qualities you want to possess.
Mhm.
So so that's it's it's um it's a nuance semantically,
Mm.
but the healing happens when we bring love to those parts of us. And
Right. Don't
sometimes
just
that false
kill it.
self language can set up a more of a
Yeah,
hostile
us versus
kind of.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You're right, and I don't think that I was hostile towards my false self.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
I've literally just gotten to the point, and I shared this before, so I apologize if you're listening and you're hearing this again, but I'm gonna tell Molly. Um, yeah, I used to be known in my circles as Sister Christian, and,
Mhm,
that was my nickname because I was such a good Christian woman who loved
mhm,
Jesus, and I wanted everyone to know about him so they wouldn't go to hell. I was very
mhm,
evangelical. I
mhm,
was
mhm,
out there. And so I feel like she's gone. Like it's
mhm,
not that I'm not a Christian. I'm
mhm,
just not a
mhm,
highly functioning doer anymore. Like
mhm, mhm.
I'm a lot less determined to show what a great Christian I am and
Yeah.
more determined to just be one, you know? And
Well, exactly. And isn't that what a great distinction?
yeah, yeah.
Because those protective parts of us
Mhm.
are there are different types of them, but
Mhm.
one type we call managers because they're managing people's perceptions. They're trying to
Right.
control how we show up so that we can earn other
Mhm.
people's favor. And when
Yeah.
they relax and retire,
Yeah.
then they in their heart of hearts, they care about other people. That's
Mhm.
what motivated you to do what you
Right.
were told was the right way to care for
Absolutely.
people. And now instead, you're loving people in a way that you've found to be healthier and
Right.
actually more life-giving.
For me
So
and
so
for
the
them.
essence is
Yeah.
still there of compassion and care.
Yes.
It's just take off that uniform that never
Mhm.
felt very good anyway. It was
No,
scratchy polyester.
well, it was heavy. It was heavy. It
Yeah,
was so
like a
heavy,
weighted
and
vest. Oh,
well, and
yeah.
I do say, even in my book, I wrote a thing. I said, Sister Christian, I feel like she's gone. Like
Mhm,
she's dead and gone. But whereas I used to stomp on her grave and I used to be so
mhm,
mad at her,
mm, yeah,
now I bring her flowers and
yeah,
I spend time thanking her for teaching me what it was like to fully give my heart to something 1,000%. For
yeah,
teaching me how to love deeply,
mhm,
without abandon, how to, it showed me, okay, this is what life is going to look like if you don't have any boundaries whatsoever.
mhm,
Is that what you
right.
want? I'm sorry, Sister
It's not
Christian,
gonna
that
go
you had to
well.
go through that. I'm
Yeah,
so sorry.
yeah,
I love you. This is not
mhm,
who I am anymore, but
mhm,
but I love you for what you taught me, and I don't
yeah,
regret that phase of my life. I don't.
right,
I
yeah, yeah,
appreciate it. Like,
mhm,
it's such a
mhm.
freeing
It's
place to
part of who
be.
you are.
Yeah.
It's a chapter in your sacred story that
Mhm.
you've come to honor, which is beautiful. And this phase that you described when you wanted to stomp on her grave
Yes,
is really
yes.
common
Yeah.
because what happens inside of us is we have polarities. We'll have a part
Mm.
of the system that does a particular job and another part of the system that really hates the job they're doing. So,
Mhm.
for instance, for some people who have experienced religious trauma or any other kind of trauma, there's a lot of pain. And so we
Mhm.
have strategies to numb the pain. Some of those strategies get us into trouble. They hijack our relationships. We can't
Mhm.
show up and do the work we need to do because maybe we drank a whole bottle of wine last night instead of one glass, or you
Right.
know other people are engaged in extreme exercise that's actually harming their body. All these strategies to numb our pain. Some are socially sanctioned, like overexercise, some not so much. But whenever there's a part of the system that's doing something heroic in service of the system, but it's causing some damage, there is another part of the system that doesn't like them or is afraid. So sometimes parts of the system carry rage, which
Yeah.
anger is an adaptive, instinctive response to injustice. It's a
And I
God-given
love
resource.
that. Thank you. Thank you. Because I think
Yeah,
sometimes we put anger in this like it's such a bad thing category. And
yeah.
it feels kind of naughty, honestly. I mean, I'm just not an angry person, but going through my anger phase of grief when, Sister Christian was fizzling out of my, sight.
Uh-huh.
I turned into somebody I didn't even like. Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
I was like, "What
Mhm.
in the world? Where did that come from?" Like, I never get road rage, and here I was,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
cussing at everyone, and I think I felt safe in
Mhm.
my car because that
Mhm.
was,
Yeah.
nobody could hear me. I
Well,
wasn't
and
looking people in the eye.
one of the harmful things in these over controlling communities is people are told that certain emotions are unacceptable.
Yeah. Mhm.
And it can be any emotion. Sometimes playfulness is
Yeah.
unacceptable because it's kind of
True.
messy.
Right.
And and so in these high control spaces, emotions are usually not fully welcome. And especially for women, anger has not been welcome. And you get called names if you exhibit anger as a woman.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
But
yeah.
these are, again, like, there's neuroscience here. We have 7 primary affective circuits in our brain, one of which is anger. And so it is a God-given resource. Our emotions all give us information. They give us energy to take action. And the idea is that we bring this leader of the internal family, the self that bears God's image, to work together with the part of us holding some emotion to say, tell me more. Tell me what
Mm,
this is about. Help me understand. Tell me your story. Then we can say, this part of it, say, well, I'm angry because of this message I'm being given that I am not worthy to teach and lead because I'm a female. That
mhm.
makes me angry. Well, it should make you angry. That's
Exactly.
injustice. And
Yes.
so we take this and say, well, thank you. Yes. Now what am I going to do about it? And so we partner with, and when we, lead from self, then we can be calm, but also courageous. We
Mm.
can be compassionate, but also confident and lean into justice issues.
I love this. Ooh, this is so good. No wonder you love your job. No wonder you're never
Yeah,
gonna retire. This is
yeah.
amazing. This is good
Well,
stuff.
I'm really a huge fan of this model. It's been
Yeah.
transformative.
Well, I
And
can imagine.
yeah,
Yeah, I've been kind of
yeah.
doing that without even realizing it, Molly. That's so funny. As you're talking, I'm like,
It's
"Oh,
interesting. Yeah.
your
The,
body, I think you naturally go through it. I just didn't know what to call it,
right.
you
Yeah,
know?
it's kind of like when
So,
you go through deconstruction before you know the word deconstruction. You just start hearing things and you think, that
yeah.
that doesn't seem like Jesus.
Well,
That doesn't seem loving.
let me pull that to the side and see,
Yeah.
is that really what I believe? Is that really what should be taught? And
Yeah.
yeah, finding that and just being able to find my voice again and
Mm,
oh,
so crucial. And as you said, connecting with your intuition, which again,
mhm,
one of the things that's been a false narrative in certain Christian spaces is this dualism that's Platonic, not biblical, about body and soul being separated. That
mm,
we are embodied creatures. The
right.
body is just the intuition that you feel in your body is just as vital information as anything else.
Those goosebumps mean something then.
Yeah, that's right. That's
It
right.
is. I mean,
Paying
usually it's
attention.
funny when I feel those, I'm like, "Ooh, there's something really powerful going on right now that maybe I can't even see or even
Mm. Hmm.
understand." But I pay
Yeah,
attention to that stuff now, whereas before
that's
I thought it
right.
was hokey. I really thought it was hokey, new age
Uh-huh.
stuff or whatever, and
Well, that's the thing, and again, I like to emphasize because I don't want people to it's very easy to get into judgment.
mhm.
Here we are
Yes. That's all I
reacting
ever used
to
to
being
do.
judged, and now we're
Right.
judging that, and
Mhm.
that's not a posture we wanna be in. When we understand that these high control religious spaces and the damage that's being done, they're rooted in fear of vulnerability,
Right.
that we want power and control as humans because it feels safer than love, because love is vulnerable. But if you
Mm.
look at Jesus' life, I I wrote one chapter in my first book about how Jesus' whole life, from conception to the cross, redeems vulnerability. Everything about his life was vulnerable, and there is a profound message in that. That this is what it means to be human in its highest expression. And but we have an innate fear of that, and so we have to work with that. We have to meet that with grace and with love, and so
Yeah, I love that. It's beautiful. And it's true. He was very vulnerable, and it wasn't well received in the institutions and systems that
mhm.
were established in the world at the time. So, and they're
Yeah.
still kind of around,
Yeah.
politics and religion. Yeah, they're
Funny how
kind of
those how the quest for
hmm,
power is still with us.
interesting. That thread, it kind of went all the way back there. Yeah, it is interesting. I'm sorry. I think somebody's delivering something outside.
That's always gets them going more than
I
anything else.
know. I'm like, "Ugh, I should put a sign out on my door. We're recording. Please don't knock." But anyway, this has just been literally, woo, I love it. I could talk about this stuff all day, but I know I want to respect your time. So um, I'm gonna let you go, but I do want to give you an opportunity to let people know how they can contact you and where they can find your book, all that good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So the easiest thing is to go to my website, which is mollylacroix.com. And you can learn about my books and connect with me. And I'm on social media, Molly LaCroix, LMFT, on Instagram and Facebook. So, and I send a monthly email to people, just kind of helping them think about these things, practice these things. And I'm getting ready to shift from an email format over to Substack. So I'm going to do that next month, but
Oh,
I'll have links to
exciting.
that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
that's
a
fun.
nice, I think it's a good place to be, just to keep offering people this new way of understanding themselves. And then eventually, my doctoral project will, I think probably what I'll be doing is a group curriculum for
Mm.
people who are recovering from spiritual abuse, because there's been such a loss of community and so much isolation and loneliness. And,
Yes.
uh, and a group process really helps meet those needs. And
Yeah. It's a place to
it's
be able to I'm actually working right now on a thing called religious rehab. And it's just a group of people meeting, and I can facilitate just some topics that we can just talk. I mean,
yeah,
it's not gonna be therapy like you, but it will be just a place to, just connect with people who are going through what you're going through, because
that's
the
right.
the
Mhm.
isolation and the loneliness can be a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but maybe I'll have you come in and say hi to them at some point and just be
Yeah.
like, "Hey,
I'd
I'm
love to.
Molly." That'd be
Yeah.
great. Yeah, so well, thank you. I appreciate your time, and I just want to say I think there's so much more that we could even like talk about. This is just beautiful. I think the thing that really gets me excited about what you do and teaching people to get to know themselves is that I think in especially specifically in religious high control systems, when people are brought up, they are taught not to focus on themselves, that they should be last. Jesus
Mhm.
first, others, and then
Mhm.
yourself. And so,
Yeah.
and then you'll have joy, and it's like,
Right.
ew, you know,
And
um,
how could that be when Jesus affirmed the great commandment,
right.
which people often drop off the loving yourself part of the great commandment, by the way. But
Mhm.
again, I like to call it the great vision, because it really challenges that narrative that somehow you're not worthy of love.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you know what I was told, Molly, and you're gonna cringe when you hear this, but I was taught that when he said, "Love your neighbors as yourself," it's already assumed that you love yourself a lot, and that's why he doesn't
Mm,
say you need to
right,
love
because we're
yourself.
so selfish, and
It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
assumed because you're so
Right.
selfish and self-centered. So this feels very weird when you first come out
Mm,
of religion to do therapy
mhm,
and to do this
mhm,
kind of work. But I'm telling
mhm.
you, it's okay to focus on you. You are
Yeah.
lovely and you are precious to not only God, but to the people who love you and need
Mhm,
you in their life. And, you getting to know myself has been one of the greatest gifts that deconstruction has given me. So
mm,
this sounds
mm.
like an amazing way to do that. So, anyway, Henry says hello. That's him down there barking.
Hello, Henry.
You are an amazing gift to the world, Molly. Thank you for being
Oh,
here and for your time, for generously sharing your wisdom with us. And I look forward to seeing everything you're going to do because I know you're not going to retire. So,
that's right. Not, no, apparently not.
yeah.
Well, thank you, Leslie.
Thank
That's
you. I honor your
been
journey,
fun.
Molly. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too.